I was born in China. I was a math geek or prodigy and won lots of math competitions. Came to the US for college, got a scholarship from Harvard. And then after business school, then I went back to China to start a company called EachNet, which then I sold to eBay 4 years later. This was 15 years ago when I sold my first company, and I retired. And then about 10 years ago, I co-founded a venture capital firm in conjunction with a US firm in China called the Matrix Partners China, which now today is one of the largest in China doing early stage ventures. And we manage about $3 billion right now. We've invested probably the past 10 years about 30 unicorns in China, including some very famous ones. And I personally sit on the board of 5 unicorns. Actually, 4 of them either have gone public this year or about to go public in the next 2 months. Let's see what else. And I just recently announced that I'm no longer going to be actively investing out of that fund, out of a new funds anymore. And I'm focusing my attention on a new endeavor, which I call it Evolve Ventures, and also Evolve Foundation, standing for a for-profit and also a non-profit arm of basically the same thing, which is, it's hard to summarize what we do, but overall focusing on the inner journey of people and helping people to grow and to heal and to make a deeper and positive contribution to this world.
Great. By the way, Nicole did share the mission statement of Evolve Foundation that you wrote, a year ago with the group. So okay. Some of the people here might have read it. So anyway, my next question, as you know, is I have had the privilege of hearing you speak on stage to discuss your personal transformation. And, I know that you had mentioned there were a few moments in your life where you really felt like you had to make a change. Could you share with the community what those were and what led you to explore, the alternate path? I'm just going to call it the alternate path. I don't know what you would call it.
Yeah, it's hard to call it anything. It's hard to summarize that. So let's see. I was very focused on the traditional path of success until actually I became successful. When I was 29, when I sold my company, I had more money than I need. I had, time. I had power. I had fame, and virtually everything that people would look for in their lives, right? And also a nice family too. But I wasn't very, very happy. I mean, I did not live life. As I look back on it, I had all sorts of beliefs that's maybe subconscious. I had all sorts of patterns of behavior that was actually both harmful to myself and also harmful to people around me. So example will be I keep wanting to be let's see what I say. I really didn't feel like myself very much. And I didn't feel that I was actually really deep down. I felt very lonely. My relationship with my kids was the only good relation I had was my wife. I really lucked out. But my relationship with my kids, relationship with my friends, with my colleagues, were all very, very cold and rational and devoid of emotions and true connection. And I would I would know people who I've known for 10 years, and I really don't know them. I worked with them for 10 years, and it took a dinner with them together with my wife, then we sort of know each other. But we sort of become friends. But without her involvement, it's like I really don't know anyone. And after one meeting, with my wife, they would become somewhat personal kind of a connection. I really didn't know whatsoever how to build a personal connection. I did not enjoy spending time with my kids, even though I had a lot of time on my hands. It's almost like a curse. It's like I wasn't aware of it. but I was living I mean, curse is actually not too strong a word to say it, but it's actually I was living a pattern of behavior that was like a robot. And the best way to talk was I was like a robot. I was rational, I was successful, I was fair, but I didn't have a lot of aliveness if I really not thinking back on it. I did not have, I didn't really cry, I didn't really laugh, I didn't really have fun. I didn't know how to have fun. So I didn't have any friends. So I mean, it took me a while to realize all this. It took, if you asked me 14 years ago, am I happy? I said, yeah, I'm totally happy. In fact, somebody asked me this. I was like, I'm totally fine. I'm totally happy. Like, there's nothing that I need to change. And also, also people ask me about my childhood or the way I grew up. I said, oh, that's perfectly normal. I had a perfectly loving parents, a normal upbringing, and look at where I am. I'm not successful. What I'm going to complain about? But I discovered that, well, over time that, actually the way I wasn't really the life I wanted to lead. And it took, I started realizing that I was behaving in many ways that was a pattern of behavior that's based on certain habits and certain unspoken and unconscious beliefs that that's really not true. But it was, taught to me. I put up this sort of shell in some ways, like almost like building a shell around me, like, oh, Bo is successful, Bo is smart, Bo is, well, I don't know, intelligent, whatever, all these things. And also in some ways, Bo is cold, not available, but that's okay. A kind of a shell that I thought it was myself. And that shell really protected me. However, having said that, the shell really protected me. It was very helpful in the process I was growing up. I think not to take anything away from the shell, it was actually very useful. However, the tragedy is that I thought that shell was myself. That I mistook the stuff I was building to please other people, to survive, to avoid being hurt, that little persona or the ego, to be my true self. And then, as you probably can guess, if I've mistaken something that's impermanent to be my true self, then I feel insecure, right? I had also become very sensitive to anything that could impact that shell. So, and I, of course, then I try to be successful and being number one. I see my screen change into a screen. Okay, all right, go. That's back. And I realized that no matter what I did in my life, no matter how successful I become, it doesn't really change my state of being. That I could become even more successful, I have more zeros next to my name, but it would not really change my state of being or my relationships or how I look at myself. And over time, I realized that I wasn't unique, that I'm not the only one, that virtually everyone I know, including people who are more successful than I am, who really suffers, and no matter how much money they have. In fact, recently I spoke with a friend who is one of the most successful entrepreneurs in China. He's very well known. I will not disclose his name. And he told me he wasn't happy, and he told everybody he thinks himself as a total failure. So this is actually something he told everybody. And people thought he was joking. Like, wow, how could this person think himself as a total failure? He's one of the most successful people in China. And then I told him that, look, somebody who is more successful than you are, and only a handful of people in China who are more successful than he was, not happy himself either. And he said, he was so surprised. He said, how could that be? This guy has everything. How could this guy be unhappy? And I told him, look, there are a billion people out there, or 1.4 billion people out there, who will be surprised to learn that you're unhappy, that you're not fulfilled. You think of yourself as a total failure. How could you be surprised? Like you're worth 10 to 20 billion dollars, depending on the market and all that, and you are not happy. So are you surprised that if somebody was worth $50 billion isn't happy? It's really quite interesting that really brought home to me this message that, well, no matter what we do in the external world, we cannot find true fulfillment and wholeness and joy and all these things unless we figure out who we are first. And also, furthermore, to do with this, what we are talking about in terms of entrepreneurship, my belief is that as we heal and we become more whole ourselves and more free ourselves, then the things we bring into the world will carry a different flavor. And we might do different things, or even if we do the same thing coming from a different place, it would impact the world differently. So it's a long-winded answer to your question.
Yeah, well, you actually answered multiple questions, because I was going to, ask what you just explained, which is why is it important for entrepreneurs to do personal development? But maybe I could make it just a little bit more targeted towards this group, what we have who are signed on today.
Okay.
So the people in this group, of course, are people working on transformative technologies. So working on technologies, that are helping people achieve this maybe truer and freer self, hopefully. So in your opinion, because you have been both an entrepreneur and an investor, what are some of the, I guess, either skills and qualities that you think are extra important for our entrepreneurs to develop? And then also, if you could bring in some of the programs, I'm not sure if they're under Evolve Foundation, but I know that you have programs that are actively helping entrepreneurs to become, more whole. Could you maybe share that with us?
Sure. There are many, many different modalities. But first comment I would make is that just because you think you are doing good doesn't mean that you will be happy. And I, even in the area of philanthropy, I know plenty of people who devoted their life to philanthropy who end up not being fulfilled, because it depends on the motivation of why we're doing certain things. So philanthropy could be easily another way of bolstering up the ego. And so if coming from that perspective, I want to look famous, I want to look good, doing good in the world. If that's the primary motivation, it would not lead to, it's in my view, I mean, I don't know for sure, but in my view, it does not lead to a truly joyous and happy life. One is still not free just because one is doing good, quote unquote. And also, I think one's wisdom around doing good might be suspect. So I think in some ways, before we can truly love other people, we have to love ourselves first. That's sort of the new agey summary of what I was saying, but it's actually very true. And in terms of specific modalities or methods, I think there are many different levels of practice. I think meditation or mindfulness is certainly one basic level practice that would, and it serves multiple purposes depending on what kind of meditation we do, but in general, it trains our minds to be focused. It trains our mind to be more aware of what's going on in our head. And maybe making our mind aware is maybe the tautology here, but making us more aware, making our higher self more aware of what's going on in our head. And a lot of times, if we, as we practice more meditation, it's like a muscle we train that enable us to catch ourselves before we act on certain beliefs or patterns. For example, like, I'll give an example. Say, suppose my son sometimes wants me to play with him. And often my reaction was, I don't want to do it. For some reason, because of certain ways I was treated, I never was used to playing. My father didn't really play with me. My mother didn't. Like, I have this belief that playing with the kids is a waste of time, and I have more important things to do, right? And I knew that. However, in the moment when my son asked me to play, I could still be consumed by an old belief, and I would say no to him, right? So by being more aware, like I say, oh, I have this negative thing about he's annoying me coming up, and let me catch this. Like, what's going on? Am I busy? No, I'm not busy. Can I take a 5 minutes, 10 minutes? Yes, I can. And where is this coming from? Like, where is like this annoyingness coming from? Oh, it's probably because right now I might feel like for example, I just had a bad conference call, and I felt I wasn't adding value to the people in the conference call, and therefore I feel a little insecure, and I feel insecure. I want to do things so that I can feel better about myself. Therefore, playing with my kids doesn't fit into that picture, and therefore, I don't want to go play with them, right? So the things, all this stuff that goes on, I need to catch first, and then our mind needs to be trained to catch this. So I think that's one very basic practice that will take a long time to, for some people, they go to one retreat, they become like open up, for example, I think our friend Nicole is like, her retreat was transformative for her, a few years ago when she went on the retreat. But for me, meditation is hard, but it took me a lot of time to really develop a practice, but that's really helpful. So I suggest everybody invest time to do that, and I think it's something that might not pay back immediately, but long term is one of the most foundational practices, because unless you catch yourself, you no matter what because we have such deeply ingrained beliefs and patterns and hurt that it's very hard to really act differently. That's one. Second one could be really going back to our history, and there are different ways of going back. It could be psychotherapy, could be Byron Katie's The Work, could be other ways of just digging into like what our beliefs are and where did it come from, right? To relive some of the memories that we might have suppressed, to talk to people about, or even including our parents and our spouses about, hey, what do you notice about me? Like, what are the things that's actually I'm behaving that doesn't serve myself? And then digging deeper of like, where does it come from? Actually, it's really important to dig deeper to see where it comes from. Just forcing ourselves to change doesn't work very well, right? And for a long time, I had road rage. Like, I'm a normal, I'm usually very calm. But when I got into a car and start driving, I become like a ferocious animal. But like my wife keep telling me this is not useful, and I know it's not useful when but like I couldn't change. Like once in 10 times I could, but only when I started looking deeper and say, like I'm rushing because maybe I'm feeling like I need to do something. I feel like at this moment I need to do something. Or I could be like, I'm losing because this guy is driving faster than me, just cut me off. I'm losing, I cannot lose. Or there's deeper stuff that goes on there. And unless we can really, tackle or to confront the deeper things, we won't be able to change. Right? So that's another one. So that the second modality could be sort of going back into history and understanding it and integrating it. That's broadly a different category of stuff. Another third category of things could be certain communication tools that I found myself to be using all the time, because it both improves my relationship and also it's a way of bringing presence to my life. So I like particularly nonviolent communication. If you guys haven't read it, I highly recommend it. It's like a book that I think everybody should read. It's called Nonviolent Communication by Marshall Rosenberg. And from my perspective, Marshall Rosenberg, he's unfortunately passed away, but he's a person who is incredibly aware and incredibly present and spiritual and enlightened. And he looked at himself as like, how I communicate with other people. And he said, how can I make that get principles out of like how do I see, like, I'm coming from this natural place how to communicate, but let me see what I can productize it. Like, now this is the word you guys all understand. How do I productize it? How do I make it into a thing that everybody can follow, even if they are not coming from that place yet? Suppose they are not enlightened yet, or actually nobody is truly enlightened anyway, but suppose they are in the beginning of their journey or really relatively unaware, but can I teach them, can Marshall Rogan say, can I figure out a way so that they could actually do a 4-step process that might sound a little mechanical in the beginning, that will bring them into a presence by just following steps mechanically initially. It will bring awareness to deeper things for them. And also, so I think it's a really powerful tool. If you need more incentive, Satya Nadella, who was the new CEO of Microsoft a few years ago, actually recommended one of the first things he did when he became CEO was asking all of his direct reports to read this book. So anyway, so that's another one. So there are other modalities out there, but I'm just listing these 3. And I think different things for different people too. It's not the same thing for everyone.
Yeah, I remember discussing this book with you. You definitely mentioned how it changed your life, and yeah. It was like so awesome. Okay, so we only have like 5 minutes left for this part of the session. So I wanted to get to Evolve Foundation because I wanted people to understand a little bit more about what you are doing now. Obviously, we have shared with the group the blog post you wrote, but maybe you can give us an update on what you've personally learned so far in your year of doing this, and also what do you think that all of us in this room can do to make this space much more impactful? What would be an ask you have? Like, if you could share your learnings, and also, is there an ask you have of the community?
Yeah, let me think. So, actually what's relevant to this community is Evolve Ventures. We have 2 Evolve. Evolve Foundation, which is nonprofit, and Evolve Ventures, which is investing in companies. And in fact, we used to call it Conscious Accelerator. We have changed the name to Evolve Ventures because we are doing not just seed stage investments or incubation, but we're actually investing into Series A as well. And our primary interest is in investing in companies led by experienced entrepreneurs that would elevate humanity's consciousness. And there are many different ways of doing that. And that sounds like a big word, elevate humanity's consciousness. But it could range from, recently invested in a company that using, augmented reality to create group experiences that make people feel connected to each other in an authentic way. We co-founded a company that teaches parents how to do parenting, coming from a neurobiology, scientific, but also spiritual perspective. How can we teach people to be better parents? Because being parent is really, really hard and nobody teaches how to do it. And everybody should be taking a lesson before they become parents, because we need to take a lesson before we drive. How can we not take a lesson before we become parents? We also, so I think that will be our primary focus. I think I did say experienced entrepreneurs because we found that just like in venture, it's very hard to build a company, as you all know. So having a team that's experienced, and that's not the only, that's not the must-have, but it's very helpful to have a team that who have done something like this before or worked in the technology company that has relevant experience. But the biggest advice I would give, if I may, is to work on yourself first. And I think, as I said in the beginning, it not only really will bring about true joy and happiness and freedom for your life, and not just in your business, but also in your relationship with your parents and your children, your spouse and friends, and in relationship with your work. And I think that's so foundational that, I think it just, of course, it's not a one-time thing. It's an ongoing process. But to start the process, and it might take few months or a few years for it to see. It certainly took me a few years to see fruition, and I think it's ultimately will pay dividends. And yeah, so that would be my biggest sort of piece of advice.
Awesome. Okay. I want to keep my promise to everyone, and we only have, I mean, we have 1 minute left, but I guess we'll just start Q&A 1 minute early.
Okay.
There was like a lot of questions, and you guys have to slow down a little bit. So, okay, maybe Jay, if you want, just unmute yourself and ask the question, and then mute yourself after.
Yeah, that was a great presentation. I was just wondering, what are the startups and researchers that you're most excited about in terms of their capacity to make an impact on improving consciousness or mental health or well-being? Thanks.
Let's see. The company I'm most excited about is actually the company we co-founded, which is around parenting, because for us, it's just such a hard job to do. And we're so not well prepared for it, and it's also so important. And a lot of times it's very hard to change ourselves when we're adults, but it's much easier to prevent harm from happening to our own children. And we are doing mistakes every day. I still make mistakes every day, right? But the fewer mistakes I make, the better my children will be. And also it's something that it motivates people to work on themselves, because one of the things we quickly learn as a parent when we start working on start wanting to be a better parent is that it's not about changing our kids' behavior. It's mostly about changing our behavior and changing our beliefs. And that enables us to dig deeper into our own history. It's so I find parenting to be incredibly powerful motivator and incredibly impactful on the kids directly too. From a technology perspective, the one I'm probably the most, one thing that really intrigues me is how can we use AI for therapy? And I used to be very skeptical about it because a machine helping us, I have a lot of concerns about AI, AI could be, because AI, the way it's built right now, it's really not doesn't have emotions or feelings or conscious, and it's very mechanical. It's an expansion of our mechanical universe in some ways. But however, I've come around to see that if one uses AI, and particularly in the context of AI assisting human beings to become more effective therapists, and eventually maybe as it gathers more data to take over some of the more basic and lower level of care for people who are suffering, might be a solution, and maybe the only solution to the massive mental health challenges we face around the world.
Awesome. Bo, just the first company you mentioned, the parenting one, someone had a question if it had a name already. I know it.
Yeah, you can download the app already.
Okay.
The name called Parent Lab. That's the name of the company. Lab is a laboratory. And the name of the app is called Hello Joey, Joey. Hello Joey, one word. Joey is a young kangaroo or young koala. So Hello Joey is the name.
Okay, awesome. There was another question I'm going to look up. Okay, so maybe Jay Kim, if you want, Jay Kim, right? If you just want to unmute yourself and ask your question. Or I will ask for Jay Kim.
Okay.
Oh, no, okay, go ahead. Go ahead, yeah.
So I'm wondering, I think what you said is really great. And I'm wondering how you internalize that in your company through your governance structure and through things like contracts, and whether you have started being more conscious in the way you do that kind of work.
Yeah, it's a good question. Certainly we tell our investee companies that we are not going to ever force them to maximize profit over doing good. That's our intention. We also advise our portfolio companies to be very careful about what additional investors they attract. And if they do attract pure financial investors, they have to be extraordinarily careful about not giving control over to pure financial investors. And from a company structure perspective, we like B corporations. We like public benefit corporations even more. The companies that very explicitly state that they are out to maximize profit in their charter, that they have other considerations and missions. I find that to be a useful declaration of intention that align, that would attract the right investors and attract the right kind of employees. Let's see what else. It helps that we're investing our own capital. So, because if we're investing other people's capital, it's much harder to say, hey, we're not out to maximize profit.
Awesome. Okay, I'm like flooded with questions. So guys, I'm picking a little bit at random here. I think Bo has answered some of your questions already. But let's go to Grace. Grace Ng, your question. If you can unmute yourself and ask. Yeah.
Hi. Yes. So my question is, I suspect that the mentality of competition and blocking out feelings is the mentality behind a lot of these fast growth billion-dollar companies. And yourself, when you were working on your company, you were also having this mentality. So now knowing what you know, is it possible to integrate this mentality and still operate in this society and this startup environment where there's so much value on high growth monetary success? It seems at odds with each other.
Let's see. I have multiple thoughts. I'm not sure I can answer your question coherently. I'm going to throw out these thoughts. Okay. First one is that there seems to be sometimes an implication that because all the successful founders today are egomaniacs and have some kind of neurosis, that's really all these famous people, all seems to be, have so much fear. If you look at even some famous founders recently, they have so much fear and anxiety and emotionally not in tune, and that somehow it must be causation, right? Somehow this thing caused them to be successful. All these fears cause them to be successful. And then also further implication that you have to be that way in order to be successful. I don't know the answer, but I would suggest that might not be true, because for every one person who is neurotic and became successful, there are probably 1 million people who are neurotic who did not become successful. Right? So you're looking at the lottery winners, right? Who became successful, because they have these drives, but these kind of fears and all that. But a lot of people have these kind of fears did not become successful. So the fact that they are, fearful and successful doesn't mean that there's a causation there. And the second thing I would say is that there are ways, I believe, to lead a company that will perhaps have, in some ways the question is, can you lead a company with love or with acceptance rather than with fear? I don't know for sure, because fear is a very powerful motivator, right? If you look at Star Wars, all these, the Sith, whatever we call it, the Siths, they leverage fear and anger, right? Donald Trump is leveraging fear and anger very successfully. So, and in some ways, there are more powerful motivators in the short term. However, my belief, and that's only a belief, that love is much more powerful in the long run. And I think if a company can figure out a way to leverage people's love of what they are doing, and conscious leadership talks a lot about that. For example, if something goes wrong in a company, a fear-based leader would say, "Who is it to blame?" Okay, this is wrong. Who is it to blame? A love-based leader would say, "Let's be curious about what happened here. How can we do a better job?" All together, right? But also with certain kind of accountabilities. Well, I'm not saying that let's all sing Kumbaya together and not fire anyone. But I think there is a way to lead differently, and particularly for companies that require a bottoms-up innovation. Right? In Army, you probably, when you need to top-down control, it might not be very important. But I think when you need innovation and continual innovation, and which is increasingly important in this economy, I think for the lack of a better word, a love-based kind of a way of leading might end up being just as powerful, if not more powerful. Though in the short term, who knows, it might not be as effective. And the third thing I would say is financial success indeed the metric we're all shooting for, right? Because maybe it's true that fear-based thing will lead to better financial success. It's possible. But financial success is not correlated with doing good in the world. In fact, as one grows bigger and bigger, growing at 20% a year is impossible. And because we shoot for that growth, we invariably lose our ways. Lots of founders start with the right intentions, but after they get to significant size and public companies, they lose their ways because they have just keep growing at 20% a year or 30% a year. And I actually believe that there's some point that there's enough is enough. Like having enough wealth and having enough size of a company that we don't have to grow it forever. But that's so antithetical to our current beliefs. Our current belief is growth is always good. And in my view, when you look at company by company basis, growth is not always good. Today, probably Facebook will be a far better company for the world if they actually do not grow. Right? Their market cap will be much lower, and the CEO won't be able to donate as much money and to healthcare. But actually, the health of people will probably be better in the world as a result of Facebook not growing and no donation to build any hospitals. Thank you very much. If they just change their ways of doing business and making, particularly teenagers, addicted, the world will be a better place.
Thank you for sharing, Vo. Next question. Can I have Martin Martorell? Please unmute yourself and ask your question.
Thank you, Paula. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. Thanks, Bob. So first, I want to say I am a psychologist and work all my life in corporate. And I do share the expectation that one day the leading by acceptance and not fear becomes the reality. I do think as well that day will come. My question is, I currently work with the government of Argentina, and I'm helping them to leverage on digital technology to raise the competitiveness of the country. But one of our key goals is to fight the current 30% level of poverty we have in our country. And I was super intrigued by your comments, and I want to have your perspective on what is your view around raising consciousness of vulnerable people as a way to fight poverty? That is something that I never heard, somebody talk about, and I'm super curious to hear your views.
Yeah, it's a very good question. And first of all, I would say that these immediate needs of poverty and disease really do need solving. And I think I admire people who are spending time directly solving these problems and helping people who are in dire need of food or medicine. However, if I look at what's causing those problems, if we look more deeply, I believe that a lot of these problems, including environment, is a result of how the world currently is operating, the deeper issues that our beliefs about growth being the most important thing, our beliefs about money being a measure of value, a belief about we can never have enough because we feel fundamentally inadequate, no matter how much money we get. So you get this situation where the rich people have too much and they keep getting more because I used to believe the same thing in some ways. Like, like a few years ago, I didn't really want to donate a lot of money. Like I could donate small amounts, but if I donate a lot of money, like my net worth would decrease and I would never get to a certain number. And that was like very hard to accept, right? And I recently, not a couple of years ago, asked one of the people who know one of the richest people in Silicon Valley very well, say, doesn't he just donate $1 billion to help, Hillary's campaign and whatnot? No politician is the same, but there are always different degrees of devilness. And it's like, why doesn't he do it? And my friend who knows this guy really well said, but if he donates $1 billion, he will never get to 10 billion. That's the kind of belief that people had, and I had not too long ago, right? So, and I think there is enough money to go around. There's enough resources to go around in the world to help everyone. So it's not the fact that there isn't enough. It's the way we are looking at distributing it, and the way that we're looking at fundamentally at our own value that's causing these issues. I'm not advocating communism, but I think there might be a different way of building a market economy that's coming from a different place of consciousness that will lead to a much better well-being for everyone, without taking anything away from the true from people who are rich today. I mean, so that's where I'm come from. I don't know how to do it. It's a systems problem. We have a big system here that's sort of it's building on itself and going in some ways a vicious cycle, and it's creating all sorts of problems in the world in terms of inequality and environmental issues. And I guess my fundamental belief, I think Einstein once said, I don't know if it's Einstein, and I'm never able to find a direct attribution, but some people would say, Einstein said once that you cannot solve a problem with the same kind of thinking that created the problem. And I do think that and for me, sort of working on our level of consciousness is creating a different kind of thinking.
Great, thank you. Can I have Dean unmute himself and ask the question?
Hi, Bo.
Hello.
Hey, so bit of a broader, deeper question maybe. I'm really curious around when looking at, I guess, companies or potential spaces to invest your leverage in, what are your fundamentals, maybe if you can touch on sense-making and decision-making frameworks you use to decide what is actually going to evolve humanity on an individual level maybe, and then on a collective level?
I don't know. I'm not sure I have a framework. I think, first of all, my view is that work has to happen on an individual basis, that we all have to do our own work. Nobody can do the work for us. So the collective change comes from our individual work. And of course, having people to support each other is incredibly important. Having a community of people who know each other, who are on the same journey, is really a must-have. Without it, it becomes really lonely and very difficult to change, because we have all sorts of resistance, inertia to change. But it really starts from our individual. We have a willingness to change, and either because we have a vision of how things could be different for ourselves, or because we have too much pain. There's only two possibilities that we're willing to change. One is we have too much pain we can bear, and then the other is, we have a vision how we could be different, right? And but in terms of how do we have a framework? Not really. I think we continue to, all of our team, we continued, including myself, we continue to evolve ourselves. And we are not making any claim that somehow we know the truth and what's most helpful. And we want to learn and see, but our lens is very much looking at how does this impact people individually. And yeah, I mean, I don't know how good an answer that is, but we don't really have and it's frankly, anytime we see somebody with a framework of how people could be transformed, like I feel a little unsafe. I don't think it's so simple. There's not really I mean, there's very broad frameworks. For example, we like Ken Wilber's framework about growing up, waking up, and cleaning up. I think that's a very elegant, simple framework that tells people, actually the most important contribution in my view of that framework is tell people, hey, the fact that you just woke up, you had some spiritual experiences, do not mean shit. There's still a lot of other things you got to do to become a whole human being. And I've seen actually in some ways more danger from people who said themselves they are spiritual, and then I don't need more work, I'm enlightened already. And there's a lot of danger from that. So I find that framework of we have to do multiple different ways of becoming whole. It's not just one dimensional of, somehow waking up and to a sort of enlightenment experience is enough. And in almost all cases, not enough. So I like the framework for its diversity, not because it's inclusivity. So it could be a fourth one that Ken hasn't discovered. So I don't know.
Wow, I really like that answer. I'm gonna steal it from you in the future. But anyway, can I have Andreas Forsland? You had a very specific question on M&A. That please unmute yourself and ask.
Hi, Bo. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Great. Nice to meet you. I had a question. Just maybe it's just kind of naive, but most companies that I've seen that have been in this transformational space, if they've gone on to make really large impact in the world, they either were really lucky or they were acquired and had the strategic support of the acquirer to sort of stay true to their mission. Do you have any examples or case studies or point us in the direction of companies that you maybe think did a really good job of maintaining their mission and continued on the path of making their impact, whether they did it by themselves or they were acquired?
I'm not sure. I actually don't really know, because we're in such an early stage in this movement that I'm not sure anything that happened today is indicative of what will happen in the future. So if you think about the earlier version of this is around brain training, training our brain to become more focused and smarter. There are companies like Happify and a few others that there seems to be becoming just big in the view, worth $200 million. Headspace is one of them, but that's a little bit more spiritual. But it's around how can we make ourselves better tools, for lack of a better word. How can we become, using these brain training tools so that we become more effective? And that it's something that a message that corporations are willing to hear, they're willing to pay for, and that's starting to pay off, it seems, and financially too. But even those companies are at the stage they're only 20, 30, $50 million in revenue and still tiny in the grand scheme of things. Or Muse, for example, that's another company that comes to mind. And then the later, like the really spiritual, like our parenting company or other companies we're looking at, they're all really early. Most of them are pre-revenue. And really, it's hard for me to think of a company that's working on sort of elevating consciousness that's of significant size. So it's way too early. And my hope is that by the time these companies become bigger and need tens of millions of dollars or hundreds of millions of dollars, that there will be enough people out there investors out there who have that kind of capital, who are willing to, who coming from a slightly different conscious awareness. I don't know what will happen. It's a risk. And if that doesn't happen, then these companies will be acquired, which I think is not the right thing, because more often than not, companies lose their ways after acquisition. It's very hard for them to keep the same mission. My hope is that that we, by some of the work we are doing, other people are doing, that the bigger source of capital will look at things differently in 5 years from now, say.
Great. Okay, I wanted to ask a question that was pre-submitted on Slack. So I'm going to read it. This is from Martin Alberti. So he asks you, can an entrepreneur aspire to create a platform beyond his or her own capacities? Meaning, is the entrepreneur who meditates and idealistic also imperfect? Just because we're in this wellness space, what if we have a outburst of anger or say the wrong thing? What does this say about us and our evolution? How open do you encourage us to be about our flaws? I assume that means to the...
Oh, we all have flaws. I still have flaws. And one of the things I think we should take to heart that we'll never be perfect. We always have outbursts. We'll always do things, no matter how enlightened we become, we're going to make mistakes. And make no mistake about that, for sure. And I would relate, like, for example, when I went to see Ram Dass, who is one of the most respected spiritual teachers of our generation, or of the past 50 years, Ram Dass, he said to me that, one of the things he said to me was that I love my dirty thoughts. And that in one word captures a lot of things. Not a few words capture a lot of things. Why? One is, even at his level, he's in his 80s, he had a stroke, he learned so much from his life, and even from his stroke 10 years ago, that even him has, even he, I guess, dramatically, has dirty thoughts still today, right? And secondly is, the way we deal with the dirty thoughts is not to reject them and say, well, I'm bad, but actually, understanding them and appreciating them in some ways. Because we are in this body, there's, anybody who claims that they don't have an ego, I want to stay away from, because everybody still has an ego. No matter how enlightened you become, we still have egos. And it's become a matter of becoming aware of them so that we're not controlled by them, by those thoughts. But we all have those stuff, and we lose control sometimes. And that just happens. And we learn from it.
Love it. Yeah. Okay. I think we have time for maybe 2 questions, but at least 1 question. So Julia Mossbridge, can you unmute yourself and ask your question?
Sure. Hi, Bo.
Hi,
So often I hear people talk about human evolution and that their vision of the world is this, driving towards human evolution. And I feel like I have a picture in my head of what that looks like, and I feel like the other person has a picture, and sometimes I feel like I don't know if they actually intersect. So I'm hoping you could detail a little bit more about sort of the characteristics of this evolved humanity that you imagine, that you would like to support, with your work in the world.
Let's see. Actually, I don't have a vision. Let's see. I mean, there are a few characteristics of this vision that I think it will be there. Like, for example, I think people will have more genuine connections, that we will accept ourselves much more, that we will be acting more out of the sense that I want to create things out of love instead of I want to create things because I feel inadequate. I think we would, the companies most likely will have missions that's beyond making money, that actually will be explicit, and also that we will potentially have a new economic system, perhaps, that would say, you know what, we'll value a company based on how much good they do, in addition to how much profit they make, right? These are all elements of, I think, hopefully will come, what future will bring. But I don't, even if I have a vision, I do not believe my vision will be correct. And I think one of the things that's beautiful about acting out of love is, sometimes movies like, all these the bad people have a vision for the world. Like, I believe this is the way it should be. Let's all work together toward that, right? And a lot of times when you have such a belief in what you could bring, a lot of times it's really not, sometimes it could be bad. I mean, Hitler had a vision for the world, right? So that's out of love, and he thinks this. I'm sure he thinks he's acting out of love too. So I think it's important for us to realize that we don't know the whole truth, that we all coming from our own perspective. But the good thing is that as long as we all moving in the right direction, eventually all the quote unquote good guys, our efforts will beautifully come to a conclusion that probably beyond any one of us expected. And that's how I suspect how things will work.
Awesome. Thank you so much. We are now out of time. Thank you so much for this hour. Really inspiring. The chat is going super crazy. So there's a lot more questions people have for you. Maybe we can collect them and give them to you. And if you have time, you can sift through them and see.
I can take one more question.
Well, I think other people are leaving, so unfortunately.
Oh, okay, then that's good. That's fine.
I want to end the session, number one, by thanking you again, and then number two, by reminding everyone that we do have our next session is tomorrow, Investor Office Hours with Mike Edelhart. 3 people from this cohort will be presenting their companies, so please, tune in and see. See how they do, give them feedback. Maybe I have already shared the information about those companies in 00-announcements. That's our primary announcement channel from now on. And that channel is moderated for those of you who don't want to see too many Slack notifications. You can basically mute general chatter, the old general channel if you'd like, and only listen to announcements because that will basically keep you on track. Okay.
Yeah, and also I see a lot of people saying, how can they contact us? So there's an email address that I think contact@evolvefoundation.net where you can give out and can send us information.
Yeah, so if you Google Evolve Foundation, we're both Shao, BOSHAO. And of course, if you have any questions whatsoever, you can always contact me and the team. So thanks so much. Thanks, everyone. And thanks.
All right. Thank you, everyone.
Okay.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.